If you guys are familiar with my comedy at all, you know I love roasts. I love insults, shock comedy, and I think it's a lot of fun just making fun of people and finding new and creative ways to call people gay and ugly.
James's mom is so fat, it takes 2 Ouija boards to summon her ghost.
But I don't know if you know this, but whenever there is a roast battle, the two comics always exchange information ahead of time to make sure that everything's cool and no one's crossing a boundary. It's usually about like family members or their day job or something like that.
I did check beforehand. I did my research. She is in hell.
It's a basic etiquette because while we do want to shit on each other, we also want to make sure we're also just joking around and no one actually gets upset. I'm only aware of a handful of times where someone has deliberately overstepped and everyone universally agrees that this is a shithead move. Usually their defense for this kind of thing is, oh, I'm just joking. And that's usually the go-to for whenever a comic is under fire for being too offensive. As a comic, I usually side with the other comedian and give them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't actually mean to be hurtful or at least wanted to be more funny than hurtful. But at the same time, I'm just joking can really be used to kind of shield themselves from any criticism for every little shitty thing that you do and is often used as a defense for outright bullying. I've seen this referred to as Schrodinger's douchebag, where he's the guy that decides if he's joking or not based on whether or not people are mad. Speaking for myself, the only time I really have reservations about jokes is when it's about real-life people that aren't public figures. I think unless they've done something particularly shitty to put themselves in the spotlight, it's not really cool to humiliate regular, real-life people. In my regular stand-up, I've often made jokes about things like the Holocaust or 9/11 or school shootings without ever having any moral quandaries about it, because mostly I feel I'm joking about the situations as a whole rather than on any one individual, and particularly victims. So that brings me to the topic of today's video. When is comedy actually offensive? I first want to explain what I consider offensive and then go through some examples, new and old. First and foremost, I think the most important thing in comedy is, like sex, you need consent. And it's better with a bunch of dudes. Just kidding. But I think the audience needs to know what they're in for and what type of comic you are, especially in a roast battle, or otherwise you're just kind of ambushing an audience with verbal abuse. And I think this type of consent is hard to get when you're an up-and-coming stand-up or people don't know who you are and you're on a lineup of a bunch of other comics, because the audience needs some time to get acclimated to your vibe before you just launch into your most offensive material. That's not to say you can't just crash into them like a runaway truck with your most wild takes. That can be hilarious too, but it's definitely more of a gamble than sort of building up a gradient of offensiveness. Well-known comics like Anthony Jeselnik don't really need to do this because they've already become famous enough to have a brand that if you are surprised by him talking about dead babies or whatever, that's more your fault for not doing your research. The next one is a lot harder to prove, but I think it's one of those things that you can just kind of sense in a performer, and that is intention. What is your intention with your offensive joke? Like I said before, comedians can often use comedy as a shield to belittle and humiliate others under the guise of saying that they're just joking. It's hard to call this out when you see it because it's impossible to know what's in someone's heart, but I think a good metric that I like to use is the diversity of material. Like, for example, if a white comic is doing a lot of racial jokes, I want to see that they're picking on everyone. Otherwise, it's hard to differentiate the idea that you like race jokes versus that you're just picking on black people, for example. Don Rickles was the king of this, having a joke for nearly every race under the sun, and it also helped that he was famously a really nice guy off stage, so that helps too.
Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, my ass, you're a Jap. I'll tell you this.
So I guess I can summarize this by saying, if you want to be racist, be diverse. So I want to talk about some moments where I believe offensive comedy actually did go too far. You probably know where I'm going with this, but I want to start with Kramer's infamous Laugh Factory meltdown. Probably one of the only cases of true, complete cancel culture in comedy. In 2006, at the height of the Iraq War, Kramer went on a racist meltdown on stage after getting heckled by some black audience members. Everyone has talked about this to death, but what I think a lot of people don't mention is that his first outburst actually does get a laugh.
50 years ago, you had you upside down with a fucking fork up your ass!
His allusion to lynching is so shocking and out of left field and kind of surreal that it's coming from Kramer that it actually does make the audience laugh. But it all comes crashing down when he keeps going and people realize he's being for real. On his Wikipedia, he cites this as a major reason he retired from stand-up. Yeah, I'd call that a pretty major fucking reason. This incident is almost folklore at this point, and from what I can tell, his set wasn't going very good in the first place, so maybe screaming the N-word at the top of your lungs wasn't the best way to win back the crowd. During his apology on Letterman, which is also unintentionally hilarious, Kramer does seem pretty remorseful, but that's not up for me to decide.
Said some pretty nasty things to some Afro-Americans, a lot of trash talk, and
Stop laughing. It's not funny.
And what were you were actually being heckled, or were they just talking and disturbing the act?
that was going on too.
Uh-huh. And did you...
I know, I mean, hearing your audience laugh, you know, and it's I'm not even sure that this is where I should...
Another comic that got into trouble for offensive comedy was the amazing racist himself, Ari Shaffir, for his infamous tweet about Kobe Bryant and his death in the helicopter accident. Now, for me personally, I've never been a huge basketball fan, and I didn't care very much about the accident, but people went apeshit when he tweeted this. Comedy clubs were forced to cancel his appearances, and his agency dropped him as well. A lot of the backlash was around the fact that other people died, including Kobe Bryant's daughter, but I always felt like this was an overreaction. He was never really making fun of anyone else besides Kobe. I think people just got really upset because he was their favorite basketball player, and he was really popular. Not to sound like one of those sports ball people, you know the types. And this is where I think consistency really comes into play. Shaffir himself says he does this every time a celebrity dies, and he also said he didn't realize that children died as well. This is totally in character for Ari Shaffir, and I don't think it ever really had anything to do with Kobe personally. That brings us to another point in this topic, which is timing. Comedians love to be the first to get a hot take out, especially in our social media algorithm economy that we live in. And while I don't believe anyone is above being made fun of, dead or alive, I personally think maybe you should wait till at least the body cools before you start ripping into a person. And I think that's why people got so angry at Shaffir for what they perceived to be a pretty heartless joke. When Charlie Kirk died, the internet exploded with memes. Some of the most elaborate AI-generated videos came out, songs, pictures, artwork. It was insane.
We are Charlie Kirk, we carry the flame.
Getting kirked quickly became slang for getting sniped, and there was just a meme bonanza following this guy's death. I'd be lying if I didn't think a lot of these were pretty funny, and that's leaning into my own political biases, but also, photoshopping Kirk and Epstein into the new Avengers movie is pretty funny. On a moral level, I don't think anyone needs to justify laughing at Kirk memes, just like with the Kobe fiasco. He was a public figure, and the ironic nature of his death and Erica Kirk's hijinks afterwards kind of justified a lot of the comedy. So when Renee Good died protesting ICE a couple of months ago, a comedian named Ben Bankus had a clip making fun of her go mega viral.
Now they just have these ICE ladies. You know, the woman who got shot in the face by ICE. I call her the ICE lady. Or after a couple drinks, I call her Ice Lady. But she's dead, and, you know, it's a damn shame.
Now, I'm not the comedy police, and I'm not here to pass judgment on the guy, and I've laughed at the deaths of others, like Charlie Kirk, but Bankus received some pretty serious backlash for his jokes. His shows were canceled in Minnesota due to security concerns, but judging from his website, he's got a ton of sold-out shows, so I don't think he's really hurting for cash. And in our rage-based economy online we live in, I think there's no such thing as bad press. Now, Bankus's comedy definitely has a more conservative slant. On his website's bio, he states that he makes fun of politics, but I think he definitely has a right-leaning bias. I went through a bunch of his comedy, and he almost never makes fun of conservatives, so I think there would be a lot more grace given to him in this controversy if he attacked both sides politically more often. So in that case, it seems like mocking this dead lady was about owning the libs rather than actually freely expressing yourself comedically. Another reason I think so many people got upset was that Renee Good was just some lady. While Charlie Kirk was a public figure and was viral online for many years, Renee Good was just a mother executed by a government agent extrajudiciously, while Charlie Kirk was killed by a lone gunman. It's hard to laugh about state-sponsored murder of a civilian, unless you believe Israel orchestrated Kirk's assassination, but that's for another video. Bankus's bit seems to be about serving an agenda more than making people laugh, and I think that's why it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And why is he always standing sideways? What is that? Please, iron your shirt. All in all, offensive comedy is my favorite type of comedy, and I think it's important that we don't start poo-pooing comedians just because they take a swing and miss sometimes. Freedom of speech is already under attack from all angles, and I think if we start trying to police every little thing we don't agree with just because it offends us, eventually the people that you shut down are going to come and do it to you using the same structures that you've supported doing it to them. So what do you think? What's your favorite offensive joke? Do you think comedians can even go too far? Are they not going far enough? Leave a comment and I'll see you next time.